The border between dreams and desperation. How people navigate the perilous USA-Mexico frontier. In the early dawn hours, when the desert still holds the night's cool, the USA-Mexico border becomes a stage for human drama, a place where dreams of a better life collide with the harsh realities of geography and policy. For many, this border is not just a line in the sand, but a formidable barrier between two worlds, one of hope and opportunity, the other of poverty and fear. This border stretches far, nearly 2,000 miles, from the Pacific Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico, snaking through desolate deserts, winding around bustling border towns, and cutting through the lives of millions. Over the years, the USA-Mexico border has evolved from a mere geographical boundary into a symbol of the complex relationship between the two nations, a relationship marked by trade, migration, and conflict. This article delves into the real-life tales of border crossers, the challenges they face, the ingenuity they employ, and the broader implications of their journeys. As we explore the lengths to which people will go to reach the other side, we uncover the human element behind the headlines and statistics, a story of courage, desperation, and the enduring quest for a better life. But how do they do it? How do people manage to cross one of the most fortified borders in the world? The stories of those who attempt to cross the USA-Mexico border are as varied as the methods they use, from scaling towering fences to navigating treacherous desert terrain, from swimming across rivers to hiding in the most unlikely of places. The USA-Mexico border has not always been the rigid line that it is today. Its origins lie in the tumultuous history of North America, shaped by colonial ambitions, wars, and treaties. To understand the present-day challenges and controversies surrounding the border, we must first look back at its creation and the events that solidified its place in the geopolitical landscape. Historical context: a border born of conflict and compromise. For some, the border is a gateway to a new life, where the American dream seems within reach. For others, it is a place where dreams are shattered, where the relentless sun beats down on those who dare to cross, and where the line between life and death is as thin as the border itself. Despite the risks, thousands attempt the crossing each year, driven by desperation, ambition, or a combination of both. The border as we know it today was largely defined by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, signed in 1848, which ended the Mexican-American War. This treaty saw Mexico cede a vast portion of its northern territories to the United States, including what are now California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. This newly drawn border, stretching from the Rio Grande to the Pacific Ocean, was a stark symbol of the shifting power dynamics in the region. Before this treaty, the borderlands were fluid and loosely defined, with communities on both sides frequently crossing for trade, work, and family ties. The indigenous peoples of the region, who had lived there long before European colonization, saw no border. For them, the land was a continuous space, not subject to the arbitrary lines drawn by distant governments. As the United States expanded westward in the 19th century, the border took on new significance. The discovery of gold in California and the subsequent rush of settlers heightened tensions between the two nations. The border became a site of contention, with disputes over land, water rights, and resources often leading to skirmishes and violence. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the border had begun to take on a more defined character. The growth of American towns and cities along the border, fueled by the expansion of the railroads, brought increased immigration from Mexico. This period saw the rise of border patrols, initially focused more on preventing cattle rustling and smuggling than on controlling human migration. The Mexican Revolution and its aftermath. The early 20th century brought further changes to the border dynamics, particularly during the Mexican Revolution in 1910 to 1920. The conflict, which caused widespread violence and economic disruption, led to a significant increase in migration from Mexico to the United States. Many Mexicans fled the violence, seeking safety and stability north of the border. In response to this influx, the United States began to implement more formal immigration controls. The Immigration Act of 1917, which among other things established a literacy requirement for immigrants, marked one of the first federal efforts to regulate the flow of people across the border. However, the enforcement of these new laws was inconsistent, and many migrants continued to cross the border in search of work in the booming agricultural and industrial sectors of the American Southwest. During the 1920s and 1930s, the US government's approach to the border became more stringent, influenced by the growing nativist sentiments and the economic pressures of the Great Depression. The establishment of the US Border Patrol in 1924 marked the beginning of more organized efforts to control the border, though its focus was initially more on alcohol smuggling during Prohibition than on immigration. World War II brought yet another shift in the border's significance. With many American men enlisted in the military, there was a severe labor shortage in the United States, particularly in agriculture. To address this, the US and Mexican governments established the Bracero Program 1942, a guest worker program that allowed millions of Mexican laborers to work temporarily in the United States. The Bracero Program, which lasted until 1964, had a profound impact on the border. It formalized and institutionalized labor migration from Mexico, creating a cyclical pattern of migration that persists to this day. While the program was intended to be temporary, many braceros stayed in the United States after their contracts ended, contributing to the growth of Mexican-American communities across the country. The end of the Bracero program did not end the demand for Mexican labor in the United States. Instead, it led to an increase in unauthorized migration, as workers who had become accustomed to crossing the border for work continued to do so, even without legal permission. This set the stage for the modern era of border enforcement and the ongoing debates over immigration policy. The rise of border militarization. The late 20th and early 21st centuries have seen a dramatic increase in the militarization of the USA-Mexico border. In response to growing concerns about unauthorized immigration, drug trafficking, and national security, the US government has invested heavily in border security measures. The construction of physical barriers along the border began in earnest in the 1990s under the Clinton administration. The Operation Gatekeeper initiative, launched in 1994, aimed to deter illegal crossings in urban areas by building fences and increasing the presence of Border Patrol agents. This strategy pushed migrants to attempt crossings in more remote and dangerous areas, leading to a rise in deaths from exposure to the harsh desert environment. In the years following the 9/11 attacks, border security became even more of a priority, with the Department of Homeland Security established in 2003 and the Border Patrol significantly expanded. The Secure Fence Act of 2006 authorized the construction of hundreds of miles of new fencing along the border, further fortifying it. Today, the USA-Mexico border is one of the most heavily fortified borders in the world. Surveillance technology, including drones, cameras, and sensors, supplements the physical barriers, and the number of Border Patrol agents has more than doubled since the 1990s. Despite these efforts, the flow of people across the border has not ceased. Instead, it has become more dangerous as migrants resort to increasingly risky methods to evade detection. Conclusion of historical context. The history of the USA-Mexico border is a history of conflict, compromise, and adaptation. It is a history shaped by the forces of colonization, war, economic need, and political will. As we move forward into the modern era, the border remains a flashpoint for debate and a powerful symbol of the challenges and opportunities that define the relationship between the United States and Mexico. Understanding this history is crucial for comprehending the current state of the border and the ongoing struggle of those who seek to cross it. Follow for more videos.